Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Arjun. I'm a junior at Bellarmine, and I'm a youth commissioner. Welcome to Words for Impact, a SED Talks event organized in collaboration with the Saratoga Youth Commission and Saratoga Library Teen Advisory Board.
I'm Sanjoli. I'm a senior at Saratoga High School, and I'm a part of the Teen Advisory Board.
I'm Avi. I'm a sophomore at Saratoga High School, and I'm a part of the Teen Advisory Board.
And I'm Alex. I'm a junior at St. Francis High School, and I'm part of the Youth Commission.
Words for Impact is the latest addition to SED Talks, a speaker series that touches upon topics and issues local to Saratoga. Whether it be writing poetry about nature to advocating for environmental bills, this series hopes to portray writing as a tool to benefit others. In today's event, we have invited 4 speakers who have made great contributions in the spheres of advocacy, journalism, environmental change, and literature.
Before we begin introducing our first speaker, I'd like to formally invite the Mayor of Saratoga, Cookie Fitzsimmons, to provide us with her opening remarks.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Cookie Fitzsimmons, Mayor of Saratoga. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to SED Talks, our Saratoga-style TED Talks. I'd also like to extend a big thank you to the Youth Commission and Teen Advisory Board for coordinating and hosting this event. It's inspiring to see young minds come together to learn from today's esteemed panel and from each other. I encourage you all to participate and make the most of today's opportunity. There are so many important issues that need our attention, and writing can be a powerful tool to make your voice heard and create change. With strong writing skills, you can communicate your ideas and thoughts effectively. You can write letters, emails, social media posts, speeches, and more to raise awareness about what you care about. A well-written and persuasive argument can garner support of your cause and inspire others to take action. So don't underestimate the power of writing. Keep practicing and refining your skills. You are the future of our community, and seeing you here today makes me optimistic for all the great things you will do. Once again, thank you for being here, and I wish you all a wonderful and fulfilling day.
Thank you so much, Mayor Fitzsimmons. We appreciate your kind words. Between listening to the speakers, we invite you to participate in an activity and let us know your words of impact. At the back paper, we have paper and pens available, and feel free to be creative and write down your thoughts. And when you're done, you can pin them to our Words for Impact wall at the right.
Let me introduce our first speaker, Susan Glass. Susan's book of poetry, The Wild Language of the Deer, won the Elise Wolf Prize offered by the Slate Roof Press. Her poems have appeared in Snowy Egret, The Broad River Review, Birdland Journal, Fire and Rain, Eco Poetry of California, Honoring Nature, an anthology of authors and artist festivals, writers, and many more. She held a residency at the Cummington Community of the Arts in Massachusetts and received her MFA from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. After teaching many years at San Jose State University and West Valley Community College, she now edits the Blind Californian magazine and the California Council of the Blind and the AABT Briefs newsletter for the American Association of Blind Teachers.
Please welcome Susan Glass.
Thank you, everyone, and happy Earth Day. Haven't we gotten the perfect weather for our Earth Day? I swear, it's really something. It is an honor to be here with all of you today, and I'm so proud of everyone on the Youth Commission and all of you from your high schools for working to present a program as fine as this one. Shaping the world through our words, that's got to be one of the most important things we can do, and I'm so honored to be a part of that today. I want to And thank you, by the way, for the lovely introduction. That was just more than I deserve. Thanks. I'd like to talk today about wonder and about what, for me, have been two life-shaping influences related to wonder: living in the natural world and blindness as a way of living in that world. This has to do with writing. Bear with me. You might think that blindness would be in the forefront of my life and that my love of nature would be second. But in a way, the reverse is true. Being born blind, I never gave it much thought, although the people who loved me, parents and siblings, certainly did, as they strove to help me participate meaningfully and fully in the world. I grew up listening to nature, especially birds. They taught me my first lessons about distance, how near or far from me, direction, sound to the right or sound to the left, height, high bird, low bird, ground bird. They taught me about seasons and the passage of time and relationships, and beautifully so, music. In a sense, birdsong was my first language. But close on its heels came the English language and the words of people who loved me. Those words named everything that I was knowing and feeling and gave me the vocabulary for expressing the knowing, the feelings, the wonder. Today we'll focus on wonder, because wonder is the first step we take as speakers and writers toward advocacy and toward making positive change in the world. When we feel wonder, we feel love. When we feel love, we want to protect and preserve what we love, what is good, what is too precious to lose. Poetry has become my way of sharing wonder about the natural world, especially birds, and advocating for their preservation. I don't want to put a damper on things, but did you know that in the last 30 years, our bird populations have declined by 2 billion? And do you know that over half the species of birds in the United States are on the decline? This is a conversation about human beings as an integral part of that wonder, because we're a harp in the string that is nature. So I write about us too. And what I'd like to do is share with you some poems that articulate this wonder that are from my book, The Wild Language of Deer. And I'll give you a little comment for each one. I have to change props here. Now, if I were a good actress, I could do that flawlessly, but. So I have the print copy of The Wild Language of Deer book. It was released by Slate Roof Press in 2022, and I brought it not for self-aggrandizement, but because I want you to see at some point today what the publishers actually did and how they made Braille and imagery an integral part of the text. So in a few moments, we'll make that available if you want to look at it as well. But right now, I will just read you some of the poems. And this is the first poem of wonder. It's called June Bedtime Story. And it's a memory of the first gardening experience I ever had with my mother. In the wild light before cataracts, God was marigold seeds sprouting from between mother's fingers, my first nursery to water and smell. Together we tamped the earth, our forearms and knees touching. She stood, and I, godchild at ear level with patchwork knees, listened to a wheelbarrow on stone, pulled by mother hands, earth-gloved and honest. The flapping burlap apron of mother lap, the snips, the trowel. God became dwarf plants and plastic six-packs and spiderweb roots clinging. And the seedlings begot evening, smelling of onions. I crouched in the basin our knees had made, unsure how seed graves could spawn life, afraid of leaving them to their dark work, afraid of running away. For me, that's about the wonder of life and death, and the wonder of a process of growing things, which, if we care well for the earth, make sure that those things are never in peril. So that's kind of the purpose of that. This is the title poem of the book, and it's about the writing process as well. The Wild Language of Deer. The deer appears in my family room, and I throw down every myth I've ever read. Great stags in the Danish king's forest, northern stars flickering in their antlers. Artemis buck avenged, Irish fairies milking hinds. This doe's bones are harder than the maple piano. Her hooves puncture the oak floor, cut jagged braille stanzas to the kitchen's rim. Her knees dispose of chairs, her shoulders thrust musky-scented into the breakfast nook, and the head mounted over the fireplace is like any face emerging from a dream that bewilders, that asks, "What is this place?" Her body is a dark space under basement stairs, where we flatten together on our bellies. I pull wet sentences from the clay of her flanks. They smell like fermented potatoes. They are the mute story I'm telling of her furious severed head. They are poems that will never domesticate, that welcome this wild language back into my home. Okay, thank you. Is it making a problem? I'm probably making noises with it too. No. So, yeah, deer. They're. Have you ever tried to feed one? When you get done with the watermelon in your hand, they keep coming after you anyway, and you're going, "Oh, you're awfully big." It's pretty funny. I love to attempt to imitate birdsong, and so this is called "Listening Blind to a Buick's Wren." And they're very common around here. The little wrens are just popping up everywhere right now in the spring. His melody is symmetrical, practiced. La 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 la, seabird. He lilts from an oleander bush, rests 3 measures, then la 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 la, seabird. His tail must be conducting, a black barred, white-tipped baton curved over his back and flicking side to side. Does his tail drive his music, or the music his tail? Halfway through my steaming coffee, he changes tunes. Ta, ti, 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 pree, as though juggling mistletoe berries, till their speed becomes a trill. Ta, ti, 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 tree. The trill bounces through toyon shrubs, so I turn my head to follow it. Cha, 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 scolding. His wife's. Cha, 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 z. His calls pounce in a tangle of leaves and twigs. I imagine his upward curving bill snatching a beetle, swallowing it whole, then borrowing a sycamore leaf napkin. Silence. And now from much farther off. Swee, swee, swee. The same wren or another. In my next life, I want to be his bold white eyebrows and his ventriloquism. How are we for time? I want to be polite. Should I stop here? One more? What are we looking at? One more. Okay. I'll find one that I... Where is... I was going to look for the flicker poem, but that's okay. I will do, sorry, this happens all the time. Yeah. Well, this is a poem about music. And you might think, well, what does that have to do with preserving and saving the natural world? But we need to be listening more and a lot more quietly. Quarreling with a flute. I played my first solo at 14, my sister at the piano whispering, "Breathe, slower, slower, rest." I was a girl, a spry and quivering column of air. If I'd been born of reed or wood, if I'd persuaded the air to pass my voice on in wild smoke, bamboo song stripped from trees, burned from the inside out, cleaving dark sound into light, maybe then my lips would kiss the warm blowhole instead of clench smiling into an embouchure. I have inhaled enough scales today to blow the circles and fifths and fourths through 18 universes. It's supposed to work. This climbing from tonic to dominant, this tire leaking for as many counts as I can bear till my stomach lies flat against my spine. Foolish to dream that Debussy's Syrinx is a melody I breathe with ne'er a metallic click. I groom my flute as I might a horse, swabbing and dabbing until the musk of my finger marks vanishes, and she is all silvery hope again. We don't speak for hours, and I go to bed angry. I dream my flute has been washed out to sea and poises on a tide pool's edge, just above salt. It seems centuries before I reach her, and when I do, she is a woman trailing long hair and skirts in the water. So, I'll just close with a couple favorite quotes. One is from my favorite Palestinian-American poet, Naomi Shihab Nye. She says, "Time passes so quickly, we must learn to live slowly." And the other thing I want to say is that we really rush around a lot doing, but we're not human doing, we're human being. We are humans being. And if we be first, everything that we do can follow. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your great talk, Professor Glass. Professor Glass will now take some questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a member will come to you with a microphone. Please limit your questions to two per person, and be mindful of the timer shown on screen.
So anyone who has any questions, just raise your hand.
What would you say like the influence of your blindness is on your poem?
I'm sorry, the influences of blindness on my poems. I think that being blind made me a listener without my even realizing it. I did participate in a lot of activities because I went to public school, I went on family trips, I did the same things everybody else did. But there were a lot of times when I was just listening and thinking about what I was hearing. And I think that for me, that listening was kind of like what it's like for you when you're about to take a very important picture to capture, for your Facebook page. Or it became very important for me to capture the essence of a moment, a sound to hold on to. And I think that had a lot to do with the kind of writing that I came to. I was also affected by my reading because my mother was an ardent reader, and there were books all over the house, and we had what we called talking books, which were books that were read aloud to me. So the words were always there. And I think that, I don't mean this at all boastfully, I'm answering your question for the first time for myself. I think that not being distracted by visual media gave me more time to spend with language and thought and sound, and therefore gave me the time to hone that art. I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. That was a great response.
Thank you, Professor Glass, for sharing your very beautiful poems and very insightful quotes and your thoughts. I'm just curious, in a lot of the poems, generally poets describe their visual world. For example, color.
Yeah.
Color and sceneries and sunlight. In your world, how do you perceive or imagine, in your world, the color red, the color white and blue, black, what does that mean to you?
Thank you for that wonderful question. And I love the way you said those words very meditatively, red, white, black, because obviously they mean a great deal to you too. Color is something that we can feel with our bodies. To a great degree, it is learned, and I have learned to associate color with other parts of living. I have a very clear memory of, you asked about red. We had a very large flashlight with 2 lights, one on each end. It was enormous. And one was a white light and one was a red one. And the white one was brighter than the red one. I do have light perception, and so I could see that. But that's all. I don't see color or shadow. But when I would turn that light on, the white light would be very, very bright, and the red light would be hotter and not as bright. So I came to associate red with hot. And, then you get wonderful, pop influences like Red Hot Chili Peppers to help you out with that. And so, there's that. And then when I remember getting dressed when I was about 4 with Mama, and she said, I'm going to give you a blue T-shirt, and this T-shirt is blue, which means it's very cool. She said, remember yesterday when you had your hand in the Slavic swimming pool? And I said, yes. She said, do you remember how cool that water felt? And I said, yes. And she said, well, that's the color of your shirt. And so my mother, in modeling that, began to help me make textural, sensory, olfactory, tactile, even taste associations with different colors. So white for me is actually very bright, that pure, and I think of white, even though sunlight is yellow, there's a white quality to me when it's a really bright day because of its brightness. Black is very thick to me. It feels like very, very thick fur when I think about it, and it's dense. If you were to try to speak into it, I'm sorry, that was an unintended effect. I was trying to make a sound. If I tried to speak black, it would be muffled, but what you got was the opposite. So sorry. Anyway, so that's kind of how I see it. And I know that black means nighttime. And so I think of it as a thick, but also a very quiet color. Does that help? Yes. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Hello. Good afternoon, madam. Am I being heard? Hello?
Huh.
Am I audible? Okay. No, I just wanted to know, the situation in which you are, does it help you to turn inward and meditate and try to connect with the divinity within you?
Can you repeat the question?
In the situation that you are, does it help you to turn inward in meditation and connect with the divinity within you?
Actually, it does. Thank you so much for that question. The question is, in my situation, does it help to meditate and reach for the divinity within? And it does. I was raised in a Lutheran church, and so, we had that traditional background. And I have, in my adult life, become very fond of yoga and of meditation because I tend to be a very anxious person. And I find that meditation allows the stillness that I need. Now, I should add that I'm not very good at it. I have what meditators call the monkey brain. I start and my head goes, grocery list, get that back, shut up, I'm busy, and it keeps doing it. But it's extremely important, and I like to meditate in silence. I like to meditate in natural settings. I sometimes try to meditate when there's a lot of noise because the noise is hard on me, and that's really hard because I have to accept that the noise is there and not fight it. That's the first principle of a meditation, is you accept what's there, and then I have to go beyond it. But yes, it's extremely important. And the older I get, the more important it's becoming, because my time here is changing, and it's going to be important to be more inward. I hope that answered you.
You are truly blessed.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you so much for your great talk, Professor Glass. That concludes our first Q&A session. Please put your hands together for Professor Susan Glass. We hope you were inspired to add some of your thoughts to the impact wall.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Our next two speakers hail from Saratoga High School. First, Sanjoli Gupta, a junior at SHS whose essay was nominated by Saratoga High School for the National Council of Teachers of English. She has written an article for the Stanford Daily and has won honorable mentions for 2 consecutive years at Yale's Mock United Nations Conference. She has been awarded a gold key and a silver key, respectively, for an essay and journalism article by Scholastic Art and Writing. In addition to essay writing, Sanjoli also writes a blog with her friends about climate migration.
Give us a second. We're switching on the mic. Sorry. Test. Hello. Yes. Thank you so much.
Please welcome Sanjoli Gupta.
Yay. Thank you so much. Tiny backpacks, small sticky hands, crayons and colors spilled across the floor, and chaotic 4-year-olds who want it their way every single time. Preschool. For those of you who have had a younger sibling or child, you know how much energy is packed into their tiny bodies. And yet, somehow, during reading time, all the children sit quietly, crisscross applesauce, and listen attentively as the teacher reads. Like magic, no one talks, and their eyes are glued to the pictures in the book. They are transported to worlds where cats wear hats, boys have magic beans, and animals can speak. Words on a page move them to laugh or cry, to feel for the characters they read about. Even as children, language has the power to captivate us and compel us to listen and change. And words have the power to shift our beliefs and push us to action, whether that be through helping with the climate crisis or just showing kindness to a fellow classmate. Believe it or not, I actually really strongly disliked reading when I was in elementary school. Sounding out the letters of difficult vocabulary and figuring out their meaning was quite literally the bane of my existence. Who needed to know the definition of venison anyway? My issue with reading and writing was that it was presented to me as a task that needed to be completed to learn, rather than an activity I could enjoy. I loved being read out loud too, but not trying to mold the syllables onto my tongue itself. But all that changed when I moved to India. Suddenly, I was living in a new country and learning to navigate a new life. I felt lost and disoriented, and reading provided a solid foundation for me to hold on to. When I stumbled into the school library, I saw hundreds of books lining the shelves in pinks and blues and maroons. I soon became friends with the librarian and fell in love with the hundreds of worlds I could fall into. Keystrokes spelled out intricate stories and gave me a way to explore new worlds while ignoring my own for a little while. My love for language was born, and with it, I started writing. As a creative outlet, reading allowed me to be imaginative, and that translated to my wish to create my own stories. I started writing short stories that came to span over 10 pages long as I got lost in the fictional world I was creating. I specifically remember writing a story about a talking shoe and her life as an inanimate object, and realizing for the first time the importance of language and its meaning and magic. What makes language and writing so important is its ability to express acute feelings that we don't wish to say out loud, and its ability to connect people through its complexity and create a community. Although it seemed daunting at first, words gave me a way to connect with the rest of the world and say things I didn't know how to say out loud. 7 years later, and I'm still in love. My interest in fiction eventually expanded into a love for nonfiction as well. Reading and writing expanded into a trial of many different types of writing, including journalism by working for the school paper and writing newsletters and blog posts about topics I'm passionate about, such as climate migration. Today, writing means more. As an integral part of my life, writing allows me to be inspired to create change or to advocate for change, whether that be through articles about the importance of recognizing the problem of climate migrants or trying to convince you to watch my favorite TV show through a newspaper story. Our world today is centered on information, a constant flow of news and current events that we listen to and use to form our own opinions and thoughts. This can make one feel overwhelmed, and that's why some peers and I started Youth for Climate Migrants, where we write digestible blog posts about breaking down the climate migration problem. Not only did this allow me to explore one of my passions more deeply, but it also helped me become more informed around the world around me and learn to write concisely and about topics that need to be paid more attention to. Similarly, I can help make a change in our world through journalism by bringing injustices to light and writing opinion pieces on my beliefs. Though this type of writing seemed serious and daunting at first, it helped me join a community of peers who are just as passionate about the subjects I am about and helped me find my voice. Words have the power to persuade. They are the building blocks by which movements begin and ideas are communicated. And for me, that's what makes writing so powerful. Sharing your story not only allows you to forge stronger bonds with your community, but also be a part of a larger movement to make the world a better place. Cheesy as it sounds, I have found myself at home with others who are interested in journalism and writing as a means of communication and interaction, and I'm excited to keep exploring language as a form of communication and change-making.
Thank you, Sanjoli, for a great talk. Sanjoli will now be taking questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a member will come to you with a microphone. Please limit your questions to 2 per person and be mindful of the timer shown on screen.
Great essay, by the way. What do you think inspired you to turn to writing and reading as you were introduced to a new country and were starting almost like a new life?
Yeah. So when I moved to India, I think I found everything very different, and I was looking for anything similar to my old life that I could kind of grasp onto, or just something I could connect with very easily without having to trying to navigate anything new. So that's why I think reading and writing was so compelling, because through reading I could go back to maybe past ideas and memories, or maybe explore a new world without having to actually physically go and explore it myself. And through writing, I could kind of write down all the emotions I was feeling and kind of process different changes and things like that. Thank you for the question.
So you've clearly delved into a lot of literature, from creative writing to journalism. I was wondering if there is any creative work or any journalism article that has been most meaningful to you.
I don't think there's a specific work that's meaningful to me, but I know, at least in my journalism class, I'm very inspired by the people around me, because they don't seem like big figures that are far away, or big pieces of literature for me to look up to, but rather they're peers just like I am, working through maybe the same changes and writing about similar things I'm interested in. So I definitely learn a lot from my classmates and from the people around me. So probably different peer editing in class, I would be inspired by other people's essays, or just looking at my own school's newspaper, I'm very inspired by the stories there.
Sure. At what age did you arrive in India, and at what age did you return to the United States?
I moved at 9.
Oh, just hold on. Did I not speak loudly enough? Okay. I was wondering how old you were when you went to India, and how old you were when you returned.
I was 9 or 10 when I moved there, and 12 when I came back. Yeah.
All right, any other questions? Okay, that concludes our second Q&A section. Please be sure to jot down your thoughts for the impact wall, no matter how big or small. Your words make a difference. Now, please put your hands together for Sanjoli Gupta.
Thank you.
We will now be taking a short 10-minute break. Please help yourself to snacks on the table on the side of the room and continue adding to the Words of Impact wall.
All right, that is our break. Thank you to the Limburg Clarinets for the wonderful performance. Now we will welcome our third speaker. Our third speaker is Christina Chang, an editor-in-chief of the Saratoga High newspaper, The Falcon. During her time with The Falcon, she covered the breakdown of city budget allocations as well as the first Blossom Festival post-COVID, wrote a series addressing mental health, and authored a narrative reflecting her own basketball journey of 8 years. Christina was named one of 7 finalists for the National Scholastic Press Association's 2022 Writer of the Year. She has received 13 journalism awards at the international, national, and regional levels. Her works have been recognized by the Youth Journalism International, National Scholastic Press Association, Journalism Education Association of Northern California, Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, and Santa Clara University.
Please welcome Christina Chang.
I'm Christina Chang. I'm a senior at Saratoga High School. And I wanted to start off by talking about my experience with the Falcon newspaper. So when I was a freshman, I enrolled in Saratoga High's now defunct Journalism 1 class. And it was basically an introductory journalism course where students would learn the basics that they'd need in order to go into the yearbook or newspaper programs. So the skills we learned in that class included writing, interviewing, photography, the Adobe suite from Photoshop to Illustrator to InDesign, and then graphic and layout making. We actually no longer have this course at Saratoga High due to low enrollment, but if you want to join the journalism program, you can go into the yearbook program first and then switch into newspaper afterwards. So the Saratoga Falcon is a print and online publication published by the 2 advanced journalism newspaper classes at Saratoga High School, and we are committed to objectively representing a wide range of our campus and community stories and viewpoints. So throughout my years on the Falcon, I was a reporter and layout artist in my sophomore year, and then a sports editor in my junior year, and I'm an editor-in-chief this year. So the way journalism works is you tend to focus a lot more on story writing and layout making when you're new to the program. And then over the years, you gain leadership positions and focus on the responsibilities that whatever your role entails. Throughout my 3 years, I have written nearly 70 stories, made 12 layouts, and over 30 graphics. So as a sports editor in my junior year, I manage the sports section of the paper, and that entails pitching story ideas related to sports or editing sports stories ranging from beats to reported stories to personal columns, and outlining layouts for the sports section of the paper. And then this year as editor, I am one of 4 editors-in-chief of the journalism program, and I oversee the 70-person staff and production of our paper. So every 6 weeks, we have story discussions where we come up with story ideas that we want to cover for the paper. We also do spreadsheet checks every class to make sure that everything is following our timeline. And then the editors curate a weekly newsletter, The Sunday Best, which is basically a collection of the most newsworthy stories we have published in any given week, and then some of our favorite columns or feature stories written by our staffers. This year, I also hosted speaker events with professional journalists from the New York Times and Bay Area News Group because I thought that'd kind of bring an interesting outside perspective to our staff. Also, editing stories and layouts is a really big part of the role. And then I also wanted to cover some writing samples. So the first story was headlined, Gaining Closure, Sophomore Speaks About Trauma of Childhood Sexual Assault, Reopens Case. And for each of my stories that I'm explaining during this talk, I will be kind of like talking about it from the angle of writing to blank. And so this one was writing to advocate for people and causes. I had initially signed up to cover a sexual assault rally at our event at our school. And during the event, I was taking notes on whatever was happening, on how many people were there, or who was speaking, or what they were speaking about. And so for this story, I was listening to a speech, and it was really impactful. And so I decided to shift the angle of my story from recapping the event to profiling the student. And the way you approach a profile is very different from the way you'd approach a typical news story. I held back on questions during interviews to allow my source to share her story uninterrupted. And I focused on listening empathetically to kind of allow her to share her story. And this led me to realize the detail that became the focus of my story, that she was actually in the process of reopening her case in court. During writing, it was also different because I was a lot more generous with my quote usage, and this allowed me to retain the rawness with which she told her story. And this allowed me to present her as empowered while still being true to the facts. The next story was Community Mourns Death of 23-year veteran teacher Todd Dwyer. And this was writing to promote interpersonal connections and healthy discussions through shared experiences. This was an obituary for my freshman year world history teacher, and through writing the story, I discovered his life and the impact that he had on the school. I interviewed past students, teachers, and even teachers who were previously his students when they attended Saratoga High School. And through these interviews, I learned about his genial personality, his memorable teaching style, and how he'd tell stories about his experiences in his class. I shared lesser-known details, such as how he was a high school dropout, a jack of all trades who had a myriad of occupations which were different from just teaching. And the goal of the story was to help others mourn and teach them who he was as a person. And writing this story helped me learn that everybody has a story to tell, or stories to tell. After writing this story, I received back a touching letter from his sister that read, Todd's 93-year-old mother was touched and comforted by the fact that his passions are recognized. And receiving this letter was really impactful for me on a personal level because it helped me realize that my words could have an impact on people. My words could bring comfort to people and help them mourn. And the last story I wanted to cover was Member of City Planning Commission resigns over comments widely seen as xenophobic. And this story, sorry, I was actually going to skip this one. The next story is Stanford professor's findings help explain why so many young people feel so miserable. And I think any student in the Silicon Valley area knows that our schools are very competitive. We are among the best in California, but along with this competitive nature comes the drawback that a lot of students don't prioritize their own health as they try to focus on academics and extracurriculars. And the story was shedding light on the state of mental health at Saratoga High School. The cool thing about journalism is, yes, we cover stories that are important to readers, but we also get to cover stories that we ourselves are interested in. So as a psychology major next year, I wanted to explore psychology through journalism. And this was a form of service journalism where you're basically writing to benefit the community around you. I interviewed a Stanford professor to understand a phenomenon called duck syndrome. And it's this idea that people are kind of akin to ducks, where on the surface you may seem like you're peacefully floating along the surface of the water, whereas beneath the surface, a lot of people are paddling frantically to stay afloat. And I thought this topic was really relevant to Saratoga High students, and so I wanted to cover a story to bring light to this. And so I interviewed the professor, I learned what duck syndrome is about, I uncovered causes and ways to cope. And then I also wanted to talk about my process with writing and how to write a newspaper story. So firstly, when you're thinking about a story idea, you want to assess the newsworthiness of it. There are a lot of factors that can play into this, but the most common ones people go by are timeliness, proximity, impact, novelty, conflict, and human interest. And at this time, I wanted to ask if anyone wants to try pitching a story idea. Yeah.
We could cover this event, and it would be timely. It would be Saratoga, so it would be close to home. The impact would be kind of what kind of change you're inspiring, and all the other speakers are. And yeah, it would be human interest.
That was a very good story idea. So after you have a story idea, you want to do some pre-planning. You identify an angle, which is, so if you have a very general story idea, it's kind of fine-tuning the idea and narrowing it down so that there's something that's like a focus to the story. Afterwards, you would compile a list of sources. For example, Sanjoli said covering this TED Talk. Your sources would be the speakers here. Your sources would be people who are in the audience listening. And you would generate relevant questions. So what did this speaker talk about? What did this audience member think about this speech? What inspired these people to come and talk here today? So those are some types of questions you would ask when covering this type of story. Afterwards, you would draft a skeleton using those questions that you have, and you'd order it in whatever way you think the story would flow in. And then interviewing. So I think interviewing is something that's pretty unique to journalism in terms of literature. And so when you interview, you want to keep in mind that it's a conversation. It's a conversation and not an interrogation. An interrogation would make someone feel really uncomfortable, and if they're uncomfortable, they won't really tell you the information that you're trying to get. You also want to come prepared with lots of questions, but also be willing to veer off script. Your interview should be organic and natural, and sometimes when it goes off script, it goes in a direction that the source is more passionate about, and you can really tell that when you're writing the story and when you're reading it. If possible, you would like to record the interview, but you do have to ask for consent, because by law in California, you have to ask for consent before recording anything. You would ask open-ended questions, because that allows your source to elaborate on whatever it is that they're saying. You also want to make sure that you're able to understand what it is your source is saying, because the point of your story is to deliver information to your readers in an easily digestible manner, and if you yourself do not understand it, you won't be able to explain it clearly. So some essential questions would be the spelling of someone's name, their pronouns, or at the end, I always like to end with, is there anything else you'd like to add? Or are there any questions I haven't asked that I should have? And sometimes this just leads to a simple no, but other times this can lead to an interesting new topic that you hadn't really thought about. A source can point you in another direction or share another source that might be better for the story. And then in terms of writing, everyone approaches it a bit differently, but the way I do it is I review my interview transcripts, and then I highlight and color code everything. I highlight sections that I'll use for paraphrased information, which is factual information, in green, and then I use orange for quotes. And I try to reserve quotes for personality or emotion. And then the way you would approach a news story is a bit different from the way you'd approach a feature story. So for a news story, we have what's called an inverted pyramid format. So if you think of an upside down triangle, kind of like that would be an inverted pyramid. And so in the lead, you'd have your most important information. That would answer your who, what, when, and where. And then your nut graph is essentially this idea of, in a nutshell, if the reader were to leave right now, what info would you want them to walk away with? So this would typically be the why and how aspects of the story. And then the rest of the story is pertinent information, but it is not as essential as what was previously mentioned. And the reason we use this is that people's attention spans are incredibly short. So have you ever heard of that saying where my attention span is similar to that of a goldfish? So in fact, as it turns out, our attention spans are shorter than attention spans of a goldfish. So goldfish have a 9-second attention span, and according to a Microsoft study, we have an 8-second attention span. So that's why we try to deliver the most important information at the very beginning before we lose the interest of the reader. And then for a feature story, there's a lot more room and flexibility for creativity and storytelling. You want a captivating lead that draws the reader in, quotes that add color to the story, and a kicker that brings it full circle or evokes emotions that your reader will remember the story. I also wanted to briefly cover the Soundings Art and Literary Magazine of Saratoga High School, which has been produced and published by students since the 1980s. It's a terrific opportunity for students to find a broader audience for their creative work in the humanities, and our goal with Soundings is to motivate students to explore their creative works beyond a mere required assignment in their English class. So currently we are accepting signups for joining the staff for next year. We have the editor-in-chief position open, as well as outreach, submissions editor, layout editor, and team member. And now I wanted to close off by explaining my key takeaways from my experience with both of these publications. So yes, both of these writings are centered on writing, but we also have photography, we have art, we have graphics, layouts in the Adobe Suite, and when you join one of these staffs, you're getting immersed in the school and the community. You're learning about the talents of your exemplary peers, you're speaking with people you otherwise wouldn't. During my time with the Falcon, I have spoken with students, faculty, the city mayor, the county fire department chief, and a lot of people that I otherwise would never have had the opportunity to speak with. You also learn life skills beyond just writing. You learn communication, adaptability, curiosity, determination, professionalism, and leadership, and much more. And when you join a staff like the Falcon or Soundings, you're joining a tight-knit community of motivated, like-minded peers. Within the Falcon specifically, I've found my best friends, and I've created unforgettable memories. And so if you have any interest whatsoever in writing, in journalism, or in creative works, I would highly recommend joining the publications at your school. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Christina, for the great talk. Christina will now be taking questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a member will come to you with a microphone. Please limit your questions to 2 per person and be mindful of the timer shown on the screen.
Go ahead. Wait for the timer. There you go. Put that. Oops, sorry.
Yeah.
Hi, what made you choose journalism specifically when you came into high school?
Yeah, so I actually think, you know the saying, the best things happen by chance? So I think that definitely applies to my experience with journalism. In freshman year, I had no idea what elective to take, and a lot of my friends were taking Journalism 1. And so I was bandwagoned into taking it as well. And then after Journalism 1, you have the opportunity to choose the Talisman yearbook or the Falcon newspaper. I was actually going to join the yearbook staff. I like the design component of being able to create layouts, but my friends convinced me to join newspaper because you're also able to get stuff done in a much more timely manner, and that seemed pretty interesting to me too. So by chance, I also chose the Falcon.
Any other questions?
Go right ahead. How have your experiences kind of like interviewing all these cool people and like working to write stories on a deadline shaped who you are?
Yeah, so I think being able to speak with a lot of interesting people that I otherwise wouldn't really helps to broaden my worldview. I'm able to learn from people that I otherwise wouldn't. For example, one of the stories I wrote last year was on the resignation of a city planning commissioner who had comments which were widely perceived as xenophobic. And it was difficult to find sources who were willing to accept her apology, but during a city council meeting I attended, I was able to hear from a speaker who was a friend of hers. And while he didn't necessarily condone her actions, he was willing to accept her apology. And so I reached out for an interview, and I was able to hear from views that don't necessarily align with my own, and that allows me to broaden my worldview.
I'm just wondering, what works of writing have inspired you in journalism?
Yeah, so I don't think it's necessarily works of writing, but I think it's also just anything around me. What I've learned from writing and being a part of the journalism program is that everybody has many stories to tell. It's just a matter of finding out what they are. Just keeping your eyes and ears peeled for whatever it is that's happening, because there's always so much happening in Saratoga.
So when you read today's headlines and you look through various news sources outside of high school, is there a story, a recent story that has grabbed your attention in a Broadway? And if so, what is that story and what grabbed your attention?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if there is one in particular, but I think a lot of today's stories, the problem is that they're pretty biased, and so you try to see a lot of different stories and get those different perspectives to uncover the truth. I'm not sure if that really answers your question.
Any other questions? Well, personally, I have a question for you as well. Where do you find the inspiration to write? Because like, if I have like a thought in my head, I don't really have the like strength in me to actually go down and sit down, research, and find interviewees and just write a draft. How do you find the inspiration to actually go down and do all that stuff?
Yeah. So I think partly there is a grading system in journalism, so you do have to write a certain amount of stories to get an A. But the other part is really trying to find topics that you're truly interested in. If you're interested enough, you're going to want to go through the work of talking to sources, of coming up with questions, and of writing that story, and in turn, delivering that information for other people too.
I think we have time for one more question.
Yeah. Generally, I find, particularly in an interview, the interviewer has his or her own personal convictions, and they try to wear the person whom they are questioning into a trap to try and get them to answer the way they want their answers. How do you avoid a situation like that? How do you get yourself trained when you you conduct an interview?
I'm so sorry, could you repeat that question one more time?
Yeah, I generally observe that the interviewer has his or her own personal convictions about any situation. And when they interview, they try and make the other person try to answer it in the way they want their answers to be coming forth. So how do you train yourself to be quite independent and only present a very unbiased view? Or even when you make questions, when you ask the questions of the party, how do you avoid trying to entrap them into answering the way you want them to answer?
Yeah, I think that's just really about keeping an open mind and wording your question so that it's open-ended, so that your interviewee has a chance to say whatever it is they want, even if it's not something that you want them to say. For example, let me think of an example. I could ask, were you here at the SED talk today? Or I could ask, what were you doing today at 3 p.m.? And so the first question kind of leads you into saying, yes, I was here at the SED talk, whereas the second question could open you up to talking about anything else that you did today aside from just the SED talk.
Yeah, I asked this question because recently I heard a CNN interview with Vivek Ramaswamy, and the way the CNN interviewer was trying to trap him in.
Yeah, that tends to happen a lot more today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay. That concludes our third Q&A section. Please put your hands together for Christina Chang.
Our fourth speaker, Susan Hinton, is a photographer for the Sierra Club, an environmental advocacy agency with chapters all over the U.S. Alongside advocating for environmental change, Susan enjoys hiking and photographing at the Soberan's Canyon Trail Bridge and works with the California Native Plant Society and the Loma Prieta, the Sierra Club chapter in Loma Prieta's water committee. In this talk, she will speak about how she uses photography as a medium to create impact.
Hello. Okay. Okay, so we have to set this up.
Please put your hands together for Susan Hinton.
Okay. Okay, to this one.
There's another. There's
There, okay.
Let me connect.
Let's see here. Okay. Well, test. Okay, except. I'm trying to get it to be more or less in the same spot, but I think I've got it now. Okay. Okay, this will wander around a bit, so bear with me, please. I'm Susan Hinton, and I'm a Sierra Club member, an environmental and social justice advocate, and a photographer. Today, I'm here to speak about words, advocacy, participation, and only a little bit about photography. I'm not using PowerPoint. Instead, on the screen, you will see a slideshow from a recent project, a photo essay on a local creek, Saratoga Creek. But while I have many thoughts concerning Saratoga Creek, its history, its health, and its relation to our well-being, I will mostly be talking about other things. First off, I'm clearly not a teenager. I'm 67 years old, and I was a teenager roughly from 1968 through 1974. So more or less between the Vietnam War's Tet Offensive and My Lai Massacre in early 1968, through the US military withdrawal, and in early 1975, when I was still 19 during the fall of Saigon. Another way to say the same thing is that I was a teenager during the Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and Gerald Ford presidencies. During the first 3 days of May in 1971, when I was 15, I was in Washington, D.C. for a huge Vietnam War protest at which hundreds of people, perhaps thousands, were tear-gassed, and during which, and I'm not making this up, 12,000 people were arrested. Mostly, as an underage protester, I spent those days dodging tear gas, and unlike some of my friends, trying not to be arrested. The point here is not nostalgia, but to help explain how and why advocacy made sense to me. It probably didn't hurt that my father was a university professor, or that my best friend's older siblings brought the so-called black armband case to the US Supreme Court while they were in high school, or that a couple of my best friend's older siblings were gay, or that even though I and my friends were woefully ignorant about the experiences of our fellow non-white students, our school elected a black student president, which is another way of saying that we were, for that day and age, fairly privileged and liberal. So that explains my interest in social justice, but where does environment come in? Well, about a year before the May Day protests, 53 years ago today, in fact, the first Earth Day events took place on April 22nd, 1970. It was at one such event on a college campus. We were 14, but we visited college campuses regularly, well, one, because it was only a few miles from our home, that we learned of dire, evidence-based pollution forecasts leading either to a barren ice age or maybe an unfathomable barren hot age. End time predictions were kind of wonky back then, though the danger of a heavily polluted earth was clear. But unlike the Vietnam War protests, it wasn't obvious to most of us what we could do. Then the war ended. My friends and I scattered to college, career, and we moved on. You have to remember there were no cell phones, no social media, not even an internet. We mostly lost touch with each other. Our lives diverged. Personally, I zigged and zagged until my husband and I had picked up a husband along the way, moved from the Midwest to California, where we finished various college degrees and started work. Mind you, I had a Master of Fine Arts degree, but that didn't stop me from becoming a software engineer for more than 20 years. Just because you get a degree in something, that does not mean you cannot do something else. Keep that in mind. My husband and I had kids. The kids went to school in Santa Clara County. We met families, lots of families, many from around the world. We worked with people from around the globe. We grew, we learned. Eventually, we were old enough to retire. My husband as a scientist and I as a contracting software engineer and manager at NASA Ames Research Center. We both wanted to retire, so we did. Now, this is an aside because, oddly, soon after we retired, there we were, marching again in a largest crowd the day after a certain presidential inauguration. That was for the January 2017 Women's March, a worldwide event we had not foreseen only a few months before, and in fact was pulled together in about 1 month. Today I advocate in many ways. I mentor foster youth. I sometimes attend city council meetings. My husband and I put solar on our roof and replaced our lawn with low-water California plants. No worries. Just this morning, I watched bees, fence lizards, and hummingbirds in our yard. Solar and lawn replacements, by the way, are privileged things to do. Most people don't live in single-family homes. But we believe it's important to act on our beliefs however we can. If you've had a chance to look at the slideshow behind me, you've noticed that water, creeks, and the environment are important to me. Without clean water, we perish. Without a natural water cycle, fish die. If fish die, then mammals die. Without clean water and a natural water cycle, native vegetation dies. If native vegetation dies, insects, depending upon that vegetation, die. If insects, which are food for fish and other creatures, die, then those other creatures die. Eventually, we are all in trouble. One of many problems our society has is that we monetize one thing at a time. For example, let's say I make my living making faster computers. That means I succeed when my company sells fast, cost-competitive computers. Now, if I need lithium batteries to make this happen, I don't have time to spend worrying about lithium mining's effect on the earth or the environment. In my mind, that is someone else's problem. That's one quick example. But consider any object or service in your life. Consider its purpose, how it's designed, and what it's designed for. Consider how it's built, how it's assembled, and its demise when it's no longer useful. These separate enterprises or steps affect our world. We could be more mindful of each step before we put it in motion, but we aren't. Instead, we are in a mad hurry, almost a race, to do one thing only, to finish. We don't think about our livelihoods in a holistic way. That's because we are not rewarded for being holistic. We are rewarded for producing or servicing one thing or one set of things at a time. This is something that needs to change, but how? How can we build so that we can consider the consequence of each step or part? So, for example, if we build a very fast, grammatically and logically correct text assembler, known to us today as an artificial intelligence or AI, are we certain that it uses vetted, reliable input data, that it has a positive focus, that it is used appropriately, that everything about it is considered carefully and holistically before being released to the world? You all know the answer. The more important question is, how can we make a world that values these things? I don't have a final answer, but I do know some steps that must be taken. Basically, people in our government, at every level in our government, and also everyone else, needs to care. Today, a standard way to make people care is to throw money at them. But that is not what I'm talking about. Too much money handed over quickly to produce a solitary, targeted result is part of the problem. But what other tools are at hand? Actually, we have a very old tool, a tool that nearly everyone can use well if used thoughtfully. We have words. What we want are carefully considered words, words that are well written, well spoken, words based on science, based on evidence, persuasive words spoken by thoughtful people who also listen, words that are revised, spoken in many ways, spoken over and over as needed. It helps if such words are coordinated, collaborated, vetted by others, and then made public. It helps if such words are backed by actions, such as getting out the vote, or even better, used in search for good people and capable people who will run for office and win. People with empathy, smart people who think holistically and perhaps creatively, people who assemble teams, people who speak well, who listen carefully, and who encourage their teams to craft more words to create appropriate rules, laws, regulations. This is part of the art of governing, and the world needs good governance. This is, for me personally, where the Sierra Club comes in, because all of the foregoing is what the Sierra Club tries to do, using words and sometimes pictures or videos. I am a newish member of the Loma Prieta chapter of the Sierra Club. I am impressed by the seriousness and thoughtfulness of its members, many of whom are scientists or who have worked in government or in academia or in fields featuring the environment, such as civil engineering or forestry, or have worked elsewhere, such as in technology. The Sierra Club is one of a number of allied nonprofit organizations focused on the environment. I particularly like the Sierra Club because of its collaborative, holistic process that is designed to encourage every member to develop their own words, causes, and actions, such as me speaking here today. Every member is encouraged to participate. Let me give another example that, though small, outlines the way this works. As mentioned earlier, I'm interested in water as a part of our natural and our engineered environment. As a member of the Sierra Club and as a member of the public, I started zooming into Santa Clara Valley water meetings. In preparation before each meeting, I studied the meeting agenda and read attached staff-assembled materials and presentations. While reading through one particular attached presentation, I realized that an engineering effort on San Jose's Coyote Creek was being put forward. A general geographic location for the effort was given, along with a less than detailed map delineating a highway and crisscrossing roads. So I pulled up Google Maps to have a more detailed understanding of the area. On Google Maps, I noticed there was a homeless encampment tagged in the affected area, though the staff presentation did not mention this. Long story short, I wrote a public comment letter that included a screen capture of the Google map marked with the homeless encampment. I also made a non-related suggestion about turning part of the other side of the creek into a small flood swale or basin designed to slow fast-moving water and to provide nourishment for plants and local wildlife. That pretty much went by the wayside. But before I did anything with the letter, I ran it by another member of the local Sierra Club chapter, and I made revisions based on her comments. We both agreed that I should send the letter as a concerned Santa Clara County citizen rather than as a member of the Sierra Club, as the issues, though important, were not major enough to run up the Sierra Club hierarchy for further vetting. Furthermore, I had a result. My first governmental impact success, though writ small. Santa Clara Valley Water acknowledged the homeless encampment problem, and they followed up with their own set of actions. Valley Water staff and directors contacted their counterparts in the city of San Jose, and they developed a mechanism for informing the encampment members weeks beforehand that the camp would be cleared. Encampment residents were also to be provided warehousing for their possessions if they wished, and they would be provided a way to move to alternate housing if they desired. If collaboration between Valley Water and San Jose had not been developed, Valley Water and San Jose contractors, engineering contractors, would have been faced at the last second with calling the police to remove the campers, and it's likely that all the camping possessions would have been bulldozed into a landfill. Again, this is a small win. But the point is, I identified a set of issues. I wrote a letter, I consulted others, and I sent the letter to Valley Water. This follows the Sierra Club process, and in the future, I hope to do more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Susan, for your talk and the great pictures. Susan, Hinton will now be taking questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question, and a member will come to you with the microphone. Please limit your questions to 2 per person and be mindful of the timer shown on screen.
Just if someone could keep track of 5 minutes, if this could just keep going.
Oh, okay.
Thank
You can do that.
Thank you.
Sorry, you got people ill. Anyone has a question? Anyone? Arjun has
How would you say that or the influence of advocacy in your youth through Vietnam protests and these other kind of advocacy goals, how has that shaped your later life and how you advocate now?
So, there are a lot of ways to answer that, but I think the most pertinent way is that I saw protests work. I saw things happen that were the direct result of people taking action. And that made me aware of the fact that sometimes, not always, but sometimes if there was something I thought that could be better, I might actually have an effect.
Does anyone else have a question?
Yes. What do you think has inspired you the most to keep pushing for change in society, in your community, or elsewhere?
What's inspired me? People. People have inspired me. I can't talk at length about the foster teen that I've been working with for the past 5 years. Somebody I met when she was 13, and today she's 18. She didn't finish grade school, she didn't finish middle school, and she certainly hasn't finished high school. But I've learned so much by being around her and trying to help her move forward. And that's true for other people in other situations.
Any other questions?
Everyone has a ticket. What question?
Does everyone have tickets for the raffle?
Okay.
We have come to the end of SED Talks. That concludes our...
Okay.
That concludes our last Q&A section. We hope this inspired you to put something on the impact wall. Please put your hands together for Susan Hinton.
Thank you so much, Susan, once again. We have now come to the end of SED Talks. Before we conclude the speaker section of this event, we will draw the door prizes.
Pull out your tickets.
Double check if you have a raffle ticket. If not, raise your hand. We'll give you one.
There is one person in need of a rescue.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, yeah. And can you add it?
Just as a quick note, we would like to sincerely thank Professor Glass for donating some of her books of poetry to this drawing. So that is an excellent addition that you can help remember these SED Talks by. So we want to thank her again. If we could give her a round of applause for that.
Okay, so we're going to draw the numbers and ask the ticket holders with the drawn numbers to come forward. We have several writing-related gift bags, and if your number is called, you can choose one, or you could also choose one of Professor Glass's books. We have 3 main prizes in addition to those, and smaller giveaways as well. So
you need to draw 13 tickets.
yeah, so 13.
Move your tags a second.
Okay, so our first number is 241285. Okay, go ahead and...
So you can choose any of these. One of these, the book, you already made a decision. Quick. Wonderful.
Okay, our next number is 241263.
Did you say 263?
Yep.
263.
I don't know, there's somebody left there here.
Oh.
Okay.
All right, we'll pull another one then.
Next one.
Okay, 241266.
Hey!
All right.
Okay, 241268.
Yay!
Oh. 241292. Okay, we'll pull another one. 241267. Two 241278. 241282. Oh.
She cannot have one of the books.
Yeah.
Do you like stickers?
Yes.
Okay, I'll get your stickers. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so 241275. Yeah. 241281. 241276.
Yay.
241273.
273.
No one? Okay. 241279. Yep. 241291. 241269. Yeah. 241277. 'Okay, our last prize is 241264.
All right, congratulations, everyone.
Thank you all for coming, and a special thank you to all our speakers, Susan Glass, Sanjoli Gupta, Christina Chang, and Susan Hinton. I definitely learned a lot and have a lot to think about regarding the impact of writing.
Before we leave here, if you haven't already, take a moment to put something on the impact wall. Thank you for being such a great audience, and I hope you all enjoyed your time here. Thank you.